All right, let's just jump right in. What if the world you think you know just isn't real? We're going to explore a pretty provocative idea today. The idea that all those values we, in places like Japan and the West, hold so dear, freedom, privacy, individual rights, what if they're not the universal standard? What if they're actually the global exception? Okay, so let's first talk about the world that, well, most of us think we live in. It's this worldview that's super common in Japan, in the West, and it's built on these ideals that we just kind of assume are the ultimate goal for every single society on the planet. I mean, you know the drill, right? We see things like individual freedom, free expression, data privacy, and we automatically put them in the global standard column. It just feels right, like that's where everyone is headed. But what if that's just flat out wrong? What if, for the vast majority of people out there, these are the very things that make us the exception?
And this is really the core of the whole argument. The model we see in Japan, it isn't the continent, it's the island, it's the outlier. The source material here is arguing that the principles that guide a country like China, well, those are actually much, much closer to the standard for most of the world's population.
So you might be asking, how does this majority perspective actually work in practice? Well, the source breaks it all down into 5, let's call them realities of power, that really shape how most of the world sees society. Okay, first up, information control. Now, for many of us, that word just screams oppression, right? But the majority view is completely different. It's not seen as some evil thing. Instead, it's a practical tool, a part of running a country to keep things stable and stop really dangerous things like ethnic conflict or political chaos from blowing up. And this comparison just captures that divide perfectly. Is censorship a hand caging a bird, crushing freedom? Or is it more like a shield, protecting everyone from chaos? For a huge part of the world, it's the shield. The main focus isn't on my individual right to speak, but on our collective need for security. All right, number 2 is freedom of expression. This idea that free speech is some absolute fundamental human right that you can't touch, that's just not a universal belief. For many, it's a political choice, and it's a choice that has to be balanced against the massive cost of social conflict. So it's basically this. One perspective says, I can say whatever I want, it's my right. The other says, hold on, your speech has a responsibility to the group. Especially in places with really deep ethnic or religious fault lines, the number one priority is making sure words don't become weapons. Okay, number 3 is a concept called state primacy. And this one really flips the whole script. It totally reverses the relationship between you and the government. The idea is simple, but it's huge. A strong, stable country isn't just a nice thing to have, no. It's the basic requirement for you to even survive, let alone do well. And you have to think about the history here, right? For societies that have a collective memory of famine or invasion or brutal civil wars, the government isn't just some background supporter. It's the fortress wall. It's the main thing keeping you alive. A weak state doesn't just mean more freedom. It could literally mean starvation or death. 4th on the list is collectivism. And hey, this isn't some old, outdated idea. For most people on Earth, putting the group first, your family, your community, your organization, is a totally logical strategy for survival. It's how you get support. It's how you get through a crisis. And here's where you really see the split. On the one hand, if you've got a solid social safety net, you have the luxury of focusing on your own individual rights, your personal fulfillment. But if that net isn't there, or it's really weak, then your role in the group, that becomes your safety net. It's not a choice, it's a necessity. Okay, and finally, number 5. This one is very much about today's world, data sovereignty. The basic idea is that your personal data, it isn't really your private property. It's a strategic national resource, just like oil or infrastructure, and it should be controlled by the state for economic and security reasons. So while the Japanese model tends to see data as something owned by you and maybe some companies, the rest of the world seems to be moving fast toward the majority view. Data is a public resource, and the state manages it. I mean, in an age of AI and intense global competition, the country that controls its data, well, that's a massive strategic advantage. Okay, so we've laid out these 2 totally different ways of seeing the world. But why? How did we end up with such different systems? The source argues it's not really about philosophy or ideology. It all comes down to history. And this chart, this really nails it. On one side, you've got the exception. Think Japan. Its history is one of high trust and relatively low conflict. That's a miracle. Really? It allows the state to be a background supporter, which makes individualism possible. Then you look at the other side, the majority, like China. A history forged in famine, invasion, and civil war. What's the logical outcome? A strong state isn't just an option, it's the rational response for survival. So, if history is what got us here, what about the future? Which one of these models is going to prevail?
And the conclusion from this analysis is, well, it's pretty sobering. When you look at the big global trends right now, fierce competition for resources, new security threats, growing social divisions, all of these things are pushing the world away from the exception model and towards the majority model. Control, order, and state power, they seem to be winning. And that leaves us with one last really provocative question. The point of all this isn't to ask, is China right? The real question is, how long can the Japanese model even last? In other words, can the incredibly stable, almost miraculous conditions that created the Japanese and Western way of life, can they even survive in the world we're heading into? In an age of growing instability, is the exception we live in destined to just fade away?